Hey yo, I watched famous YouTuber gets demon possessed. Then Jesus, Hayden's testimony. I watched this. I gave it a 3 out of 5, and it was a pretty engaged 3 out of 5. I could still find myself like almost falling into the feeling of this feels like a like someone who's just propping up like rhetorics or just a stand-in for an exemplary or an example like that's just being propped up for like typical Christian propaganda of like someone getting how where they started and how they came to Christ kind of thing. But for the most part, I ended up seeing enough that made me think, wow, this guy does have his own journey and his own life experience, and I can respect this story kind of thing. Um, so yeah, as far like when I give it a 3, like it was very close to a 4, just because it was also like kind of relevant. Like I did get while like a little defensive when he's like talking. If someone's saying something to suggest that like one shouldn't dive into or like practice Buddhism or like meditation, that kind of thing. Like if that's being suggested, I get defensive. But this was still an interesting story and I could still like respect it, and I'm not left thinking like this is just like BS or this is just stuff I should ignore kind of thing. I could respect that like I'm not listening and thinking like, oh, he's lying or oh, uh whatever. Like, I don't think this is true. Like, I could imagine that he had the experience he had, and I don't. I'm still not left with like, um. To me, this is just one person's negative experience with meditation and stuff in that realm. Um, but And so I didn't like that it felt like it was trying to color all of that as like bad, harmful, don't get into it because it's going to go badly for you, or this is how badly it could go for you. Like that portrayal was, I didn't like that. And that was just the sense I got. But again, that was just his experience. So of course he would, put it that way because that's what it did for him. Um, but to me, and I kind of I put a whole bunch of notes in, and I was just initially I was just trying to like record some thoughts about so I can make it easier to um, jumpstart what to talk about as I'm recording, but I ended up just spewing a bunch of just most of what I already felt. And so if there's anything I leave out, you might get more details from the notes I took than this video. But anyways, so yeah, I just didn't. That was the part that like, if you're trying to say that like all this is bad, I'm not jiving with that. But I can appreciate that like the thing I can appreciate the most is just like you don't know what you're doing. You don't know like you know you think you're in control, and then all of a sudden something starts happening that you don't know what's going on, and that's when it like you can get really uncomfortable and realize how vulnerable you are kind of thing, and you don't know what you're doing. um and I can see that. I could definitely see that, and imagine that with like meditation, mindfulness stuff, where you're like, all of a sudden you're feeling something you've never felt before, and you're like, what the heck is going on? I don't feel in control of this. I don't know what's happening, and I can't stop it, kind of thing. Like, I could imagine that, and that is like, yeah, it makes sense to have a negative experience with that. Um, but I think that's like true of general, like that's not particular to Buddhism or mindfulness meditation stuff. I think it is a little more interesting, maybe, or maybe a little more vulnerable because you're like the target is your mind, it is your internal stuff, versus like, if you're riding a bike and all of a sudden you start going downhill really fast and you don't know how to put on the brakes and you're feeling uncomfortable in that way, or you're interacting with someone and all of a sudden they start doing something weird, or your body just starts doing something weird, like, I don't know, from my perspective, and I kind of wrote this down or whatever. Like, but yeah, anyways, I don't know. I was just to me like when that happens and when you don't feel like you're in control and like you don't trust what's going on and like it almost resembles something that you've been told is bad and then you start believing it's bad, that's where the badness comes in. And that is kind of how I was perceiving it. Like from my perspective, I'm not like on the boat of, oh yeah, I think there are such things as demons and I think he was experiencing a demon. Like from my perspective, and again, like I'm incredibly ignorant and naive, but I'm looking just, clarifying how I reacted to it. To me, I can more easily imagine that he just believed what was going on was bad and shouldn't be happening, and it could only be hostile and negative. It was interesting that he started getting like thoughts and desires to like cause harm. That was really weird, and that was another thing where I was like everything I've been reading and understanding about like Buddhism and stuff in that field, like I don't again, I there's a lot more research left for me to do, but I feel like from what I've seen, it definitely doesn't seem like it's there to lead people ultimately to this place of like violence or harm. Like it seems like it does far more good and, a lot more to get people on a loving path than on a harm causing path kind of thing. Um and so that's my perspective. And so I was also like curious, like how much of the Buddhist mindfulness stuff that he tried, does he look back on and think, some of it was good, or does he look back and think, no, all of it was, demonic stuff, sinister demonic stuff that was just masquerading as goodness. That was like it offered shallow peace or shallow love, but deep down it was like you know, ultimately rooted in evil and hostility and harm kind of thing. Or like was there one particular thing that was really bad? And like it had to do with like that Hindu stuff that he started going like where he's like third eye meditation or something like that. Like, is there anything? That's where I was curious about that. But yeah, was there anything else? I was curious if he'd like get a diagnosis or something, or like would he be, what would the medical system label him as, and would that reveal anything or clarify you know his situation or what he went through a little more, or give it a different insight or perspective that might like be like, oh yeah, this does follow a trajectory, or like maybe people with this experience or personality or disorder shouldn't meditate, but everyone else is, you can exercise some caution, but like, and that was the other thing where I was like, yeah, you know what, I can appreciate there's caution worth exercising when you're messing with your mind or whatever. um but to me, I'm still left thinking like, yeah, i'm not I'm not I feel like from at least my experience, mindfulness meditation has done way more good than anything else I've done or found or whatever. And so that is where I'm left like that really sucks that it went badly, but I feel like I'm only heading in a good direction. That is my sense. I don't see like some good and some bad. For me it does feel like on the whole, generally more positive all the way around. Like good intentions, compassion. Um, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That's just my sense, but that's where I'm curious. Like, what would he have put for himself? And I think the other thing I was curious about, like, was it was interesting because for him it seemed more about like pride and kind of solving that issue while falling back into it. And that's where I was curious. Like for me, meditation and Buddhism has all been about like getting control in the most, fundamental way, most, most significant way possible. Like when you can't control your situation, when you can't control what you're feeling, how can you be okay with that kind of thing? What is the most reliable way to be okay? Is it controlling your situation? Is it just controlling your mind or whatever? Is it just yeah, that's what the pursuit of like mindfulness, meditation, Buddhism stuff has been for me. Um, and just because there's so much, there's like overwhelming and bad feelings, and terrible ideas of catastrophes and situations that I wouldn't be okay with, and like how could I be okay with that? And it doesn't sound like that was the issue for him. It sounded like he wanted to get rid of his egos because he just didn't like being a prideful person. Um, and maybe it gave him maybe eased some anxieties or some general uneases that he had, but nothing like existential overwhelm, which has been a lot of my, you know, what I've been going to Buddhism for. But I don't know. I don't know how much of a big difference that makes, but that was also something I noticed. But yeah, anyways, that was my reaction. I feel like I've got a good amount there.